All right, let's do a little exercise because all the people that would help me, you know, Steve and everybody, and also all the people I interviewed, from Fred and Dave and you, Wade, and all this. Could you just stand up and kind of let's Willie and all the people and get an idea of everybody that was involved in this? Chip, I actually interviewed you earlier, and that are hanging out that didn't hang out. But I mean, I interviewed from A to Z, from Dave Nichols to Bill Couch, you know, one of the greatest fitters that ever was in the industry, and you know, so I really got a great perspective on everything. So this is Simmental's American journey. Boy, it was a journey. You guys have been all over the darn place, and it was fun. I like learning. And my goal was to learn something new every day. And boy, this took care of 8 months. That was fun. Now, I thought the journey started with Parisian, but Burke Moore dug back, and in the 1800s, they were hauling in Simmentals to try as range cattle in the Southwest, and also to cross on jerseys for dairy cattle in New Jersey. And it didn't work out, but they came in. And they actually tried to get them started then, and then they just kind of fell off the map. And then of course, I think Travers. I'm sorry, I've used that name so many times, I just haven't had to pronounce it. I just had to write it a lot. And he brought in Parisian, and that was a good stroke of luck because he was a good bull. And a lot of these times when they brought these first bulls in, they weren't necessarily always the great ones. But this turned out to be a good breeding bull and a good display bull. Got the breed off to a great start. And Mr. Smith was one of the evangelicals of the Simmental world that ever existed. I mean, he would talk to anybody. Dave Nichols told me about him. He was just hanging out in the lobby while in Denver, and he was standing still. So Mr. Smith came up and got after him because he said he needed to own some Simmental. So I mean, he really got after it, got this breed going. And when he came in 1966, this is what the industry was. You know, we were still in the end of the belt buckle phase with these smaller cattle. That's actually a Penn State heifer where I went to school. And performance was just getting started. This is Glenn Butts, who helped run the Performance Registry International, PRI. And the Certified Meat Sire Program, and also the State Beef Cattle Improvement Associations were very strong at that point. That's really where the power of performance testing was, not really at the breed associations yet. And so we got to a start. In 1965, we also had yield grades come in, and our cattle had composition problems. They were fat, and they were darn fat. And we really needed some of these continental cattle to lean them up some. But the trouble is weren't coupled yet with quality grades. They weren't really used much. And so they were there, but took time to get them coupled and get them used. So we had a lot of cattle with ribeyes like on the left. And I mean, we had a problem. We needed some help. And the Simmental Association came in, and it was a really interesting association. It was centered around the cattle, and they had Dale Lynch, who was the first exec, and he had a great background. He had been exec at Performance PRI, Performance Registry International. He was also running the progeny testing and sire evaluation for Curtis Bull Stud, and he did a nice job. And these guys were pretty radical. I mean, just any way you put it, they were pretty radical. And I mean, his quote from the beginning goes, "From the moment of its inception, the new association cut loose from pedigree fixation, only performance, genetically defined, and market-driven counted." That's a pretty bold statement. Now, I came from Red Angus, and Red Angus was a philosophical breed. And it was formed in 1954 from genetic defect cattle. I mean, that's what they were. And all they wanted to do was implement the new technology of performance testing. They were the first organization to do it. If you took Black Angus at the time, it was the opposite. It was pedigrees and those type of things. It was the breed. It wasn't a philosophy, it was the breed. So those were two opposite things. And this kind of crunched both of them together. And that was kind of an uneasy alliance that still goes on to this day between the philosophy and the breed. And so it's an interesting mix. And so anyway, you still have that, and it's still important, and philosophy is extremely important to this breed. Ray Woodward, I wrote a little section on him. He was extremely important. Dr. Woodward came from Miles City, he's a Montana native. He wrote the rules. He helped develop the Line 1 Herefords, some of the early important genetics work. He wrote the initial rules and regulations for you guys and did a heck of a job because they've stood the test of time. He was also, he brought a lot of the very important bulls over, Bismarck, a lot of those really important early bulls over for ABS. And he was inducted into the Saddle and Sirloin Club in 1991, so he was your first person. You've had three. He was the first person that got in. He was a very, very important person. Now, the founding principles, and again, these are a little radical. Open AI, and at that point, most of the breeds all had closed AI. Like you couldn't use an Angus bull unless you owned part of them. I mean, they were at studs, but you couldn't register them. Open herd book, no color restrictions. They didn't want full blood as the ideal, and they did not support shows because they were really deathly afraid of fads. And what it came down to is they wanted to have mass production of cattle that would be profitable for both a purebred producer and a commercial producer buying the bulls. And so it was in a mass production concept. And then the other concept on the purebred industry is rarity, where you can sell cattle for lots of money to fellow purebred breeders. And it's really two different ways of looking at the industry. They had the former with the philosophy at Simmental when they started, but that's always been kind of a little bit of a tension between those two, the rarity concept and the mass production concept to service commercial producers. But that's definitely where they came down. That philosophically, they wanted to have mass production and have an economy based on the commercial industry. They were lucky enough to grab Don Bannerman, and boy, I got such a kick out of interviewing him. What a wonderful guy. And he was really at the vanguard of the performance movement. He had gone to work for the Montana Beef Cattle Improvement Association, the state association, and he grew it in a couple years from a few hundred up to like 1,200, 1,300. It was amazing. It was just amazing how he grew it. So, and he came up, he had so many innovative reports and things and computerized at Montana State. I mean, he was right at the very tip of the spear when it came to the performance movement. And like I said, you were lucky to get him. And he was enthusiastic. I mean, he would get out there and beat the bush. And I mean, some of the things, they had the national sales that were worked with the state associations that thousands of people attended at these annual national sales. He got hooked up, you heard about this earlier, with Boeing and got computerized on a mainframe that was way out ahead of everybody else. They went on herd inventory. Whole herd reporting became a thing that Lauren talked about with total herd reporting. Well, Don Vanderman was doing it way back then with Smile and then the herd handling programs. And he had some of the most innovative reports for your herds. They're all represented up there in the top right. I mean, it was really cool stuff. I mean, it was really cool stuff. How far ahead they were. All right, let's see if I can get another slide. Okay, now this was really what put Simmental on the map. The 1971 sire summary. And this was from field data. That had never been done. It had always been structured progeny tests. And they talked about bluff earlier during the day. And that was the first to use that in America. And this was a dream of Don Vanderman's. And all he didn't have the expertise or the money were the only problems. So he talked Ray Woodward into loaning him Paul Miller, Dr. Miller, who was on sabbatical at ABS to write the program, and then he absconded with the money for a film to promote Simmental to print the thing and put it together and get a program. So, I mean, there was nothing that would, when Don got something in his head, by golly, he got it done. And that was, I mean, this is really what put Simmental on the map as the great performance breeding got it moving and got its personality. And then they did it every year after that. Tremendous accomplishment. Now there's some young men that for 6 years BIF gave out the Organization of the Year. Except Simmental was always winning it, so they kind of retired it because it got a little embarrassing. Now, the guy on the left is Rob Brown, and he's going to go in the Saddle and Sirloin Club on November 11th in Louisville. And I hope as many of you can make it as possible, because it's quite an honor for Rob to be in there. As you read this book, he was extremely important to the history of this organization. The young man in the middle is Dave Nichols, who was president of BIF at the time. And on the right is Don Bannon, of course. And Dave was the second Simmental person to go into the Saddle and Sirloin Club. So that represents the three of them that have made such an impact. Now, Don, he started out in his house in a log cabin as the office, and he moved above a barn. And he got up to 55 women with typewriters and stuff, and so they were getting a little crowded. So he got a building, bought some land really cheap, and boy, that turned out to be a gold mine. And they got this building built and really served them well. And if you look up here, I don't know whether this has a pointer or not. Does this have a pointer? Well, it doesn't matter. Look at the expression on those young women's faces in the Swiss outfits. They're just saying, "Holy hell, get me out of here." That's Parisians that they brought to the opening of the building. But I mean, it looked like a lot of fun. That building served the association extremely well. Now, Don Bannon also really got out and beat the bushes and formed 39 state associations during his tenure, which was a tremendous accomplishment. And so this has the strongest of all the breed associations I've worked with and studied. This has the strongest state. It's kind of a confederacy with these strong state associations, and there's always been a little bit of tug of war because some of the state associations have gone that typical purebred model, and that's fine. And the association has tended to stay down the performance road. And so sometimes they haven't exactly always been pulling the cart in the same direction. But I mean, that's the way life is, and that's different opinions in different areas of the country. And so anyway, that was an interesting dynamic. And Bird helped out, Bird Dog and some of that down, did a really nice job on it. In 1975, boy, they were getting up. They went from 0 registrations. They were typing up around 80,000, and so the administrative end of it got to be pretty big. And they brought in Earl Peterson, Dr. Earl Peterson, who had been a university financial person, and they hired him. Now, this was kind of an odd situation, though, because he didn't necessarily, he was underneath Don Bannerman, but he kind of reported directly to the board, which is a really bad situation to put Don, quite frankly. And but I mean, that's the way it was. And it's kind of the way it's worked with every exec. You've kind of given your execs their heads at the beginning, and then the boards would kind of slowly try to get some of that back over time. But it's been pretty consistent in your history. So anyway, that's the way that worked. But then at the end of Don's career with Simmental Association, that was in '75 when they brought in Dr. Peterson, and registrations peaked close to 90,000. I mean, it got way up there, way up there, and the show started by the state associations in the mid '70s, and they got very popular. Investors entered the business, and the investors could write off passive losses And it was a really good deal for them. The higher priced animal and the rarity of the animal made it better because they only had to pay for maintenance costs, whether it was a $30,000 animal or a $3,000 animal. So actually the higher the price benefited them from a tax write-off. And some breeds really got into this, and it got into Simmental. And I mean, some people made a lot of money on it. There was an agricultural downturn. Anybody that was there, I mean, we were dealing with 18% interest and inflation like it was just crazy. It was a tough time to farm and ranch. It got really tough. And also other breeds had their place in the sun. Each breed kind of had their place in the sun. And there was a 30% drop in registrations. Now, Simmental had a little better loyalty than a lot of the breeds because of the philosophy. So a lot of people hung with Simmental where they didn't hang with other breeds. They just kind of got into them, made their money, and got out of them. And more people hung with Simmental than many. But a lot of people jumped from breed to breed to breed as they got hot, as these newly imported cattle were coming in. But there was this blue collar versus white collar, servicing the investor clientele versus the people that were supplying. A lot of them got him out of the commercial world, kept records, and were supplying both to commercial producers. And Don was definitely he was not a shy person, and he was not one that was inclined to service the white tablecloth clientele. And there's a parting article he wrote for the Simmental Shield that is really quite revealing, and I think it's kind of a fun read. And so he just left. He got really kind of a little wound up with the 16-member board because it was a small board. It's very dynamic. He could have never got that sour summing pulled off those shenanigans at the end. It just wouldn't have worked anymore. So things had changed, and Don left, and they didn't do a search. They just brought Earl in. Now Earl was the polar opposite of Don. I mean, he was a business guy. I mean, he came from a farm, but he did not think of himself as a cattle guy. And he was an administrator. He was a pragmatist. Don was a dreamer. And there's been a lot of that over the years, that when you go to a new exec, you kind of go the polar opposite of the last one. And the most that you've kept with continuity is when you went from Jerry to Wade, but most of the time it's been a little bit of a knee-jerk to the polar opposite of the previous one. But this is one of your second longest serving exec. Earl did a nice job. One of the things he did is he let Steve kind of have his head there, and they brought in the computer program in-house, which I think was talked about earlier. And the number one reason that breed execs get fired is changing computer systems. Because it always takes 2 to 3 times longer to produce, and it always costs 2 to 3 times more, and generally the boards get bored with it and fire the exec. And Steve, a lot of execs owe a whole lot to Steve that they had their jobs for as long as they did. The other thing that came out, and this was all gone through earlier, was Cornell. They brought Cornell on board. Phenomenal amount of science and innovation got done during that period of time. They brought the sour summing. They were going up and just continue to improve it. The other thing they did that John did not talk about is they did a lot of validation along the way. That John didn't talk about at all. That these things work, that there wasn't G by E interactions, and just a whole lot of verification that was really, really good. So John, next time, you need to get all that validation stuff in there. And that's Dick Quass on the left. There wasn't a picture of him earlier. All right, but in the 1980s, even though Cornell was rocking along with all this neat stuff on genetic predictions, Showring really took over the breed in many ways. And the state associations were driving it. And we can kind of snicker at those, but like that animal up on the top right, that was pretty much ideal for the time. I mean, that was a pretty good animal in its day. You know, it was pretty correct because a lot of those cattle got pretty straight shoulders and straightened their hocks because it just made them taller. And so I mean, there were some problems. And you guys had, like I said, you had some really top-notch fitters, Dick Overpack, Johnny Hough, Bill Couch. I mean, you attracted some of the good ones, and they knew how to pick cattle, and they got that. The other thing is Simba had come in earlier under Don, and that also hit its peak in the 80s. At that point, full bloods and Simba made 25% of the registry, even though you didn't call them full bloods at that time. They were animals born before animals. You know, there was some other designation for them. So they peaked out. There was some real things on the horizon that were problems. This elephant ad really gored the sacred ox, I'll tell you, because Angus put that out, and everybody had these frame 10 cattle, and they came out that these cattle weren't what the packers wanted, and they weren't. And that hit kind of hard. And that was in 84. Also in 84, U.S. Meat Animal Research Center came out with a study that said they did the maintenance requirements for black baldies, Charolais, Jerseys, and Simmental. And Simmentals were wacko high in maintenance requirements per pound per kilogram, or whichever way you want to do it. And then you combine that with the size of the cattle. I mean, they were jet engines. I mean, they were really, really hard to keep cattle. And you know, that was tough on the cattle. And instead of the size base, the first reaction was, well, we should sue Mark. Well, that's not quite the founder's vision. And then the Reagan changed the tax laws in '86. Well, that just boomed that investor market just went to hell when he changed those tax laws. It no longer was profitable the way it was. Then they ran the Delphi panel. American Simmental Association got the biggest, best agricultural advertising firm. They spent $40,000 on a panel to see where Simmentals fit in the commercial industry, and the results were they didn't really fit at all. And the Simmentals of that day. And that kind of got a little bit swept under the rug, $42,000 worth of bad news. So anyway, there was some real bad things on the horizon here. And this is what Brian stepped into. I mean, he stepped into a tough situation because there was some bad things on the horizon. Came down from Canada. He was an excellent marketer, really good at export cattle. Met people really well. He had got off to a good start. They had the World Simmental Federation, had over 1,000 people there. He was doing a lot of export market. They also had the Focus 2000 came under his tenure, and that was Steve Reimer and some other Willie and some of the other people that helped ramrod that deal. And they decided to say, what do our cattle need to be? And really, this breed can be broken down to before Focus 2000 and after Focus 2000. Because they said we needed to go in a different direction. Because they brought experts in from all over the country, and they said that we don't like the cattle. And so they needed to be changed. They're too hard going. Simmentals, if you remember that ugly little term. It just wasn't good. So there was a type change. That type change was going to happen whether it was Focus 2000 or not, because you couldn't sell these frame 10 spots and the diluters. And Tom Hook picked this tiny little frame 7, which everybody thought that he lost his mind. He picked such a little tiny dick. But that's where it went, solid bodied, these more modern frame cattle. And boy, these things just went to hell. I mean, really went bad. I've never seen anything go so far south since the Hindenburg. I mean, it was really bad. We had this tide change. The commercial market was gone. Most of the office was up in this region just went over like an atom bomb. His staff got divided. Brian had a strong personality, and the staff kind of divided up into camps. Then there was this whole raft of lawsuits, and boy, I mean, it was ugly. And there was all this just slanderous and libel communication going on, and letters, and this stuff. They had this newsletter, which I have a little piece of it. Boy, I wanted to take a shower after reading those newsletters. It got really ugly. And Brian just, in 1996, just kind of left. He got too much for him, and didn't come to the annual meeting, which I guess was quite a colorful event. I think it was in Jackson, Mississippi or something. Mississippi. Well, I guess that was very colorful. But anyway, they moved on. And you were so lucky to get Jerry. I mean, we in the industry, we had kind of thought he lost his mind, because we didn't think this was a sinking ship. We thought this ship was on the bottom of the ocean. I mean, we're truly, we thought this wasn't going to come back. And I don't know any other breeds that have gotten off the no-buy list once they're on. But Jerry, nothing. I said, Jerry, weren't you aware of this stuff? And he said, well, I just kind of Mr. Magoo didn't do it up there and got to work. So I thought that kind of summed it up pretty well. Boy, he did get to work. I mean, the total herd reporting, the carcass merit program, we got Marty Raw, new herd handler that was electronic, the progress through performance, which was started under Brian Kitchen, had the Simplace that everybody suddenly thought Simmental were carcass cattle, even though it really hadn't had any data yet. They got the frontier beef systems where they got into genomics at the beginning of everybody. I mean, boy, they got to work because they didn't have any money to promote. I mean, the budget was broke. And so, I mean, he went about getting data and said, we're going to prove these cattle will work. The right kind of Simmental. Not all of them are right, but the right kind sure work. The other thing, and this really wasn't led by the association, but just naturally, things turned black. I mean, 90% of the registry is now black. And I mean, there was many people that were involved in that, but in terms of Jim Taylor was one of the main people that pushed for black, a non-diluter, and then polled. And then Dave Nichols was very important. First was polled, pushing that trade, and then on down through the black and then non-diluter. So they had a little different priorities, but they were going to the same place. And so this was a big shift. I mean, a seismic shift. And I visited with Fred. A lot of these bulls are like 3/4 fleck feet. I mean, a lot of them really go back to strong fleck feet roots. This is a lot of what drove it. I mean, this CAB. All right. The Simmental was another one of the really important things, because you either, once you got that F1, you bred a Simmental to an Angus, you had to breed something. Normally it'd be bred back to Angus, and that F1, you can have a sustainable crossbreeding program. So it's very important. 60% of the cattle are now Simmentals. That had to come at the expense of something. Came at the expense mainly of the full bloods. And the Simbrals, they declined quite a bit in the registry. They're very important. I think it's really important to have your parent stock and the fleck fees, the strain that won out. I think it's important to keep those and keep them vibrant. The show cattle, the PTP cattle, it's not a niche, it's a notch. It's a pretty big market. And I know if I was back in central Pennsylvania where I grew up, I'd probably be in that market, because you can't not to make it selling bulls, but the base market for the whole breed is selling bulls to commercial producers. But a lot of people have to make their money selling show heifers. This is part of the deal. But you have to keep your base market on a solid foundation. All right, and in the 90s, got into breed alliances. This was something I worked on. It was like pushing a rope up a hill. I mean, it was hard, but we got some things done. Started with Jim Gibb in the mid-90s. This we worked on 1999. In mid-2000, we worked on the 6th Breed Consortium. And this was the ultimate thing. It was IGS that came out of it. And this was led by the American Simmental Association. And the feeder profit calculator was another thing that Simmental fought for and stood up for the commercial producers that could use it. And Simmental got itself in a leadership position. And that's the most important thing. It is seen as a leader in the industry and promoting crossbreeding and giving tools to crossbreeding to commercial producers for crossbreeding. One of the things when Jerry left, they moved Wade in to have continuity of this direction. It's a good direction. I'll show you. This is where Jerry came, and I mean, to keep that thing from just going down to a novelty breed was really quite something. And then you can see where the ASA Red Angus Alliance came in, started coming up. Wade came in. Boy, you guys are in good shape. I mean, the reserves you have, that beautiful building, great staff. I mean, it's good. It's really, really good. And Wade said something about this last night, I believe. But here you guys are on the left. This is your registrations compared to all the other breeds. And there's been a race being run since they were imported in the late 60s. You guys are winning that race by a bunch. But you're helping everybody because your competition is not these other breeds that you're kind of whooping. Your competition is straight breeding Black Angus, period. And so you're all in the same boat of working against that straight breeding Black Angus. And these other breeds were higher than you at times, but I mean, you're doing the job. Where you're going to go from here is the question. I mean, how are you going to handle success? Because you're successful. And, you know, I did the history, I didn't do a crystal ball, but, you know, that's going to be your challenge, to handle success, to keep your direction, and that everybody should know by heart, that saying. And I really appreciate it. I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. I just had a blast working on this. And Wade said I work day and night. I'll just say one more thing and then I'll get down. I have a bad back, so I can only sleep about 2 hours at a time. So I get up all the time. And, you know, I get up and I think around, send an email out or work on something. And I would do that ungodly hours. And then somebody would respond. I'd be at 2 o'clock in the morning and then I get the email right back. But I mean, it was a lot of fun, a great staff to work with. I really appreciate it. Again, it was just really my honor. Thank you very much.